Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat podcast, a platform that celebrates the rich tapestry of professional diversity, with a particular emphasis on empowering women. We aim to foster diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, for all, while recognizing and championing the achievements of everyone as a central pillar of our journey. In our conversations, we explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to diversity and empowerment. Today, VPG's Stephanie Grover is going to chat with Olga V. Mack. Olga V. Mack is a fellow at CodeX, the Stanford Center for Legal Informatics, and a Generative AI Editor at law.MIT Computational Law Report, and CEO, founder, and award-winning general counsel, operations specialist, and tech startup advisor, who encourages lawyers to embrace disruptive technologies that make law more functional and accessible. She served as the lateral CEO of Parley Pro, a cutting-edge contract lifecycle platform that revolutionized digital negotiation. Under her leadership, Parley Pro was successfully taken to market, experienced significant growth, and was eventually sold and integrated into LexisNexis, showcasing her ability to drive innovation and execute strategic business decisions. A 6-time TEDx presenter with an exceptional blend of legal, technological, and business expertise, Olga is one of today's top speakers and thought leaders. Find her latest insights at Above the Law, Forbes, Bloomberg Law, ACC Docket, law.MIT Computational Law Report, Newsweek, VentureBeat, and her podcast, Notes to My Legal Self. Let's get started.
Well, it is so nice to finally meet you. So to start with, could you tell us how you know VPG and how you met Ashley and what led you to be here and doing a virtual water cooler chat today?
Well, good to see you, Stephanie, and good to meet you as well virtually. And I am sure one day we will meet in real life, because what I know for sure is that everyone I meet virtually, sooner or later, our paths cross, because we tend to attend similar conferences, have similar interests, and I definitely get around. I've heard a lot about the water cooler chat from Ashley and a few other folks. We connected, I think the first time we connected was at the USPTO, the Patent and Trademark Office. And from there forward, we have had many virtual conversations. And I was really excited to receive an invite from you and Ashley to have this conversation and maybe share some useful tips with your audience.
Yeah, awesome. I'm definitely very eager to hear from you. You have such an amazing background. Just looking through your LinkedIn profile, there was so much on there that just kind of wowed me. Could you talk a little bit about your journey? I noticed in your bio, you said that you grew up in Ukraine and moved here when you were, I believe, 13, correct?
I was a teenager. I was around 13, 14 years old. I started high school in the United States, and my life has transformed through immigration. It's not something I chose for myself. My parents essentially treated me like a luggage. Olga, get in. We're going across the world to have a new life. And I did not have an opportunity to protest or question that decision, and instead found myself overnight in what I call Candyland or Silicon Valley, and have had opportunity to be exposed to technology and the way it affects our lives, our communities, and our countries. Got really excited, especially about the impact of technology and the fact that laws and communities are not quite keeping up with the developments. And that has both negative impacts, leaves some folks behind, but if done right, could actually propel people forward. And that idea of propelling people forward has been very impactful in my life. And as I was going through college, I decided to scale justice using law and technology, and ended up going to law school to essentially to be a tech lawyer by design. And what that practically meant was focusing on intellectual property, security, and privacy. All of those fields have been growing fields 20 years ago. And I had an opportunity, especially in privacy, to be one of the first, and security, maybe less so in intellectual property, that because by then it was somewhat of a more developed field. However, the applications of it to internet technologies and mobile technologies and disruptive technologies are unfolding in front of our eyes as we speak. And I've had an opportunity to apply them to new facts. And I've thoroughly enjoyed that career of being a tech lawyer by design. It gave me a lot of opportunities and it gave me a lot of access to new things and imagine what the world could be. It gave me an opportunity to help some of the brightest minds to do the right things so that in retrospect 2020, they would be proud of their decisions. And over time, I transitioned from an advisor and legal advisor to something more of a builder, especially in legal tech. Because remember, I went to law school because I wanted to scale justice, because I have a definition of justice. And I find that building is a way to put your footprint and make sure that it's sort of shaped in the way that you like. And so I transitioned from a tech lawyer by design to a builder of future of law.
I'm a little curious. You said that you went into justice because you have like a specific definition of justice. Do you think you could talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah. As someone who had an opportunity to grow up in a country that maybe has a different definition of justice, and then immigrate to, let's just loosely say, democracy with a lot more access, and yet still many opportunities for many. Because as we know, even in democracies, we do not always bring people along. We leave a lot of communities behind. There are demographics that are not at the table and do not have the same access. And my definition of justice is very rich, deep, and wide. And we probably don't have an all day to discuss it, but at a high level, it is about bringing people along, giving them opportunities, having access, and have them be at the table so they can benefit individually, as families, as communities, and as countries.
I think that's so important. Thank you for talking about that. In your journey, you talked about going from practicing law to building law. Why do you think you made that change and what led to it?
Well, I did not expect to make that change. I did not go to law school to become a builder. In fact, I made a very active choice not to be a builder. My parents are engineers. I was very much encouraged to pursue engineering. I took enough engineering and science both in high school and college. I just didn't necessarily feel like this is what I wanted to do. And as I said, I had a very specific definition of justice, and I was really interested in pursuing that. So if anything, I made a very active choice to practice law. And I'm really grateful for making that choice. For me, practicing law is a privilege. I thoroughly enjoyed giving people legal advice. I've invested a lot of time, money, and energy to be the best lawyer that I can be, given the number of years I've practiced. And I'm incredibly proud of the achievements I've had as a lawyer. I was invited to become a builder multiple times through big opportunities and small. Initially, they came as opportunities to advise various future law, legal tech, or related field startups. So I've advised many of them. And I thoroughly enjoyed a different role other than sort of helping with legal challenges, but building challenges. And so they became sort of an acquired taste. And I could see the impact and what it means to do the right thing with the right team. I was eventually asked to join Parley Pro, which is a contract lifecycle management platform, when it was 5 years old and was about 80 to 90% done being built to take it to market. It was an opportunity that I actually initially declined. In fact, I declined it for about 6 months. And the reason I declined it was precisely because I was a very happy lawyer. I thoroughly enjoyed giving people legal advice. It took me just a little while to realize that the opportunity was at the right point in history where I can impact the definition of justice, not just being an advisor, especially on the legal side, but I could actually be an active builder. And even though I resisted it for the first 6 months, I eventually said yes. I then regretted it for about 3 months. But after that
Really?
after that 9 months period was over, I thoroughly found a place to enjoy it. And in fact, today, I can't really imagine doing anything else other than building the future of law.
Yeah, I think that's a big change to make and definitely a big leap, but it worked out for you really well. I know that you are also a 6-time TEDx presenter. That is so impressive to me. I'm curious, what was that process like for you? What was your experience like being a TEDx presenter? And did you find that it was very different knowing that it was going to be presented on a big YouTube channel? Lots of people are going to be watching it, even those that aren't in the audience in front of you. Did you approach it any differently?
As I think there is a theme, I usually resist change. I was first invited to give a TEDx talk in San Francisco, and I actually declined it for many reasons. I think one thing you have to keep in mind is that English is my second language. I have probably a million insecurities around all kinds of things, not just sort of public speaking insecurities, but insecurities about my accent and whether I'm understood and how do I sound and on. We can fill an episode with Olga's insecurities. And so when I was approached to speak at TEDx San Francisco, which is actually in a TEDx space, one of the bigger stages that you don't even apply, you have to get an invitation, and it's big.
Wow.
It's big and prestigious, and I basically was not ready for it. And again, there's sort of a few conversations, I would say a few months go by before I said yes. And that was very much a life-altering experience. TEDx San Francisco is known to be a big stage, but also known to be a stage that coaches you and takes your hand and helps you get on the other side of it. And for me, that took about 6 months. And that was a journey of many insecurities along the way. And what I found when I reached the other side of it was that my life transformed both as a speaker. And then I think what really was incredible for me is that I've reached hearts and minds of many people that were not in my zip code. And that talk was transformative for some. And I saw it as an opportunity to move toward my definition of justice, not just in one-to-one conversation or one-to-few conversation, but one-to-many conversation. So ultimately, the reason I proceeded doing other TEDx talks is because the ideas that you can share on this platform can really help shape the future of law and justice for me. And I find it very impactful and exciting to continue sharing those ideas on that stage.
I'm actually really shocked that you kind of stood up for yourself in the beginning and said no when you weren't ready. I think a lot of people today have trouble saying no to opportunities, even if it's something that is like a really good opportunity, like a TEDx talk. If you're, I guess, not ready, there's still like a big FOMO fear of missing out for not doing it. So do you think you had any FOMO with that? Do you think you regret not saying yes immediately, or do you think it was better to wait till you felt more comfortable doing it?
Well, what happened, I was actually persuaded. So even though I said no, folks sort of pursued me and persuaded me. I am an introvert. I do not necessarily naturally seek limelight, although when I'm in it, I've learned to enjoy it. And what I enjoy the most is the impact of that, because there is something really powerful in sharing ideas in sort of one-to-many, and you can see the world shifting and moving into the direction that you would like to see it move. And I find it extraordinarily powerful. So I'm less concerned about FOMO. That probably doesn't have nearly as much impact on me because I'm an introvert. My natural reaction is to go sit in my office, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I created an environment that I love. It's a place that has objects that I love and makes me happy. But it's not always a place that can move the world in the direction that I would like to see. And for that, I found that those opportunities to have conversation in one-to-many are just much more impactful and therefore much more persuasive for somebody like myself who has a definition of justice.
So you said your talks really moved audiences, you found. What topics do you think moved audiences most, and what did you find resonated the most with your audiences?
First TEDx talk I did where I was incredibly nervous was about this technology called smart contracts. And I've heard from many people worldwide that this was their first talk about this technology and that tickled their imagination and allowed them to think about this technology in a different way. And I thought that was kind of incredible. And so to this day, I keep in touch with folks who use this talk to propel various ideas, and they do all kinds of amazing things for their communities all over the world. And I just never thought that that was even possible. My next two talks were much more focused on law. One of them, my second talk, was focused on law being of service and lady justice to actually showing up and serving communities. And I felt like it was a very important talk to make sure that we look at law from that lens. And again, I hear from a lot of folks who are building the access to justice and legal tech communities, how that reframe the way they approach law. The third talk was in a similar theme around the universal language of law, which I think should be less about words and much more about visuals. It is absolutely the case that we are humans and we are visual creatures. We process information much more effectively through visuals, and it is a better way to be of service and increase access to justice and have sort of the universal way to have access to laws. And so, again, heard from many folks in various government entities and nonprofits about how they change the way they deliver services and how they have conversations in the communities to make sure that they're much, much more accessible. So those examples have just really changed the way folks approaching these conversations. Most recently, I've done 3 TEDx talks this year. They are focused on impact of AI. I didn't set out to do any more TEDx talks, but I found myself in the midst of many AI conversations. I think AI will transform the way we law, and I deliberately use law as a verb because I think it's going to be very impactful for us as individuals, communities, and countries. And from delivery to substance of law, both to individuals and companies and small and big businesses, it will be completely transformative. So I felt very compelled to give talks about the skills you need to thrive in this changing landscape. Also, how to supervise AI technology. And then I did a 6th talk, which I didn't intend to give, but was asked to give because I've been doing a lot of research on the intersection of insurance law and finance. And insurance is one of those places that is widely misunderstood. It is a financial instrument wrapped in legalese, which makes it extraordinarily inaccessible. And so my 6th talk is how to make that much more available to everyone and treat it as a financial asset and instrument that folks can benefit from. I found myself compelled this year to focus on AI as a technologies in various areas because I think in the 3 to 10 years, our lives and the way we law will be transformed due to this technology.
I want to circle back really quick to using visuals as a universal language. I just really resonate with that. I love that. I'm a visual artist myself, and I do find that there's so much meaning you can convey in visuals that everyone can understand right away when looking at it that you can't really get with just words. And especially like you were talking about before with legalese, even if you understand the language, sometimes even that is very inaccessible to people that don't necessarily understand all the terminology. I definitely know that if I were to look at like insurance right now, it would not make a lot of sense to me. So I would love for more visuals to really serve as a universal language.
Yeah,
And
I mean, we rely on visuals when we do dangerous things, when we drive. That's why we have
yes,
road signs. They help us
a
know
stop
when
sign.
stop sign, traffic lights, all kinds of other things. And we know that visual language works. That's a really prime example that is familiar to everyone all over the world, pretty much. Another example that is very familiar is example of pandemic. When we really thought that this was a matter of life and death, to make sure people wash their hands, they sanitize, they stand 6 feet apart, like all of those things. You look at visuals all over the world, and it doesn't matter that it has Chinese, Spanish, English, whatever. You would understand what the sign is telling you. That language of visual conversation is incredibly powerful. It is standardized, it is understood, it could be learned. You don't have to have a high literacy or comprehension. You can be a person of special needs, all kinds of things. Those are very helpful. And so I do think that this visual conversations and intelligence and communications is very important. And if we really want to bring access to justice, we have to master it, at least to some extent.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I love what you're saying about the pandemic, because I immediately thought to like even going to like an airport and having the little visuals of like two little footprints on the floor for where you're supposed to stand, and having the dots spaced around 6 feet apart, not knowing, not having a sign on the wall saying to stand 6 feet apart, but having those actual visuals of where people should go. That is so important and so true that it's anyone can understand it, like even a little kid or an adult, doesn't matter your language level. So I think that is so important for accessibility and inclusion for sure. And I would love to see more visuals in the world like that.
Yeah, visuals can save life. You travel to Mexico, you see a sign of an alligator, you know exactly that you have to be careful. I mean, it's very powerful. People register visuals, with fewer words. It's a much more immediate reaction. It definitely helps to have access and safety and do the right thing and really benefit from access to laws and for justice to serve everyone in the community.
To sort of switch to what you were talking about with emerging technologies and specifically AI, I'm a computer science major myself, minor in human computer interaction. So I just graduated a couple weeks ago, and I found that in my classes, we had a lot of discussions of AI. And specifically, I had classes about professionalism in computing that would talk about like codes of ethics, and we talk about how AI is being integrated with that, as well as patenting AI and patenting code and everything like that. I'm a little curious, knowing what you know about emerging technologies and how they interact with law specifically. How do you think it should be integrated into law school in the future for emerging students and emerging lawyers?
You had a few questions in this, the role of ethics. And ethics and integrity are very different from laws. I think of laws as a floor. You can't violate laws, because if you do within, a range of enforceability, you basically will go to jail or prison, or you will be fined, or you will at a minimum have, consequences and reputational damages, depending on enforcement. Ethics and integrity and those concepts are more of a ceiling. They are value judgments that we as a society, organizations make and hold ourselves to a much higher standards. Those are not new questions to AI. As somebody who has been advising about emerging technologies, whether it's mobile, internet, blockchain, whatever, those issues come up because all of those emerging technology at some point have raised the issue, what is the right thing to do? And while we have many laws in the books that cover things like fraud, independent of technology use, technology also brings capabilities. And one of the unique things about AI is the ability to impact at scale. That makes it a very unique technology that one person's miscalculation or misjudgment could set a series of events that really could impact more than one person, more than one community, more than one country. And that makes it a technology that makes it increasingly more important to ask the question of what is the right thing to do. Those questions have always been asked. I can tell you that as somebody who advised early internet companies, mobile companies, I always would sit down my stakeholders and say, what do we want to be known for? 10, 20 years from now, people will look at this company and say, those people did the best they could under the circumstances, and they made right choices in life. That's one outcome. The other outcome, you can look at us and say, wow, those were opportunists who did not care about the world. What do you want to be known for? How do you want your children to judge you? How do you want history to remember you? When you force people to have this conversation, people who are creators, people who create technology, who create something that didn't exist before, it creates a pause and helps them to sort of think into the future 5, 10, 20 steps ahead and really ask themselves the question, what do I want to be known for? With AI, because you have this opportunity to have a much greater impact, we need to train people to systematically ask this question, not sort of just what is the floor, what is the bare minimum legal, how do I not commit fraud, for example, because that is fairly highly regulated in almost every jurisdiction, independent of technology you use. But there is a gray area that new technology allows you to do new things that may fall outside of sort of traditional, let's just call them crimes and bad acts. And so we need to train folks to look at novel situations and really systematically ask, what is the right thing to do here? What do I want to be known for? What kind of footprint do I want to leave? Do I want my children and next generation use me as an example of right things to do or wrong things to do? And I think it's a very different inquiry than laws. It's related. It's ethics and integrity and various other things. It's a whole different discipline. That's why we see many companies are increasingly hiring chief integrity officer or chief ethics officers. That sometimes overlaps with law and lives in the legal department. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it lives in risks. Sometimes it lives in the office of the CEO, depending on all kinds of other things. But we must increasingly teach that, yes, in law school, but frankly, everywhere else. Because anyone equipped with this very powerful technology, whether you're an artist, an engineer, a marketer, a sales professional, a lawyer, you name it, you may have an impact at scale, and you really should not be asleep behind the wheel. And there's nothing natural about it. You need to be trained to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially for AI. I've noticed a lot of people are using it, like professionals and students alike. It's almost, at least with my generation, I've seen in like college classes, it's almost a problem where they use AI for everything, even though it's sort of been known to hallucinate and make up facts. It's not necessarily like always true or right, but people will still just use it the same way they would use like a encyclopedia.
It's a tool, and every tool has a learning curve. Mm-hmm. And not every tool is good for everything. It's sort of like asking, is a spoon better than a fork? And the answer is, it depends on what you're eating. Sometimes chopstick is better. So mm-hmm. Understanding the tool, what it's used for, and how do you not misuse it are important. It's good that people are playing with this tool, but the skill of teaching folks to do the right thing, not misuse this tool, and make sure that they leave a good footprint that they are proud of, I think it's a skill that's worth teaching independent of what it is that we're learning.
I would definitely agree with that. So I'm curious, what sort of advice do you think you would give aspiring lawyers that want to get into the intersection of law and technology, want to specialize in that?
It's interesting. People ask me for advice, and I don't think I took the most efficient route to be where I am or to do various things that I was doing. I mean, I think what I've just shared is that my path to various destinations was paved to a lot of resistance and no's, mm-hmm. And persuasion. And, I think you have to be very careful when you ask people for advice. Because just because Olga's past worked 10, 25 years ago, it doesn't mean it's ever been a good pass. It might have been suboptimal path, even for Olga. And most importantly, the facts and circumstances have changed today, and you are a very different person. All of that to say, I think it's worth asking for advice many times as you can, but more than just asking for advice, asking kind of how did you arrive to this solution and why, and what you wish you did instead. And then equipped with all that much richer information of why and how and circumstances, make a right decision for yourself that ultimately may be very different than the one that everyone else around you made. But your ability to make the right decision was impacted and shaped by their mistakes and circumstances and good decisions and bad decisions. So ultimately, yes, ask for advice, ask for much more information. But, if you are a lawyer, you are known for your independent judgment. Do not suspend that independent judgment for yourself when it applies to you, to your life. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is life. So for you to make an independent, good decision, you need to make an independent, good decision. You have to approach it as circumstances you found yourself in, based on the learnings of everyone has had, and then make the best decision for yourself at that time.
Yeah, I always love to think of mistakes as learning experiences, because I think that's what they really are. And it's great to look at other people's mistakes as learning experiences for yourself as well. Sort of like the best of both worlds. You don't have to make the mistake, but you can still learn from it. I think that is, I guess, not necessarily advice, but really good mindset to have. And going off of that, I think I'm going through probably one of the biggest changing periods of my life right now as a recent college graduate. The path ahead for me, I guess, is something I have no clue what it's going to look like going forward. So I'm really wondering if you had to tell yourself something right after graduation, right after coming into this period, what do you think you would say and why?
My favorite thing to do is to take advantage of opportunities to be the first, the one and only. I'm an immigrant. I try to look for opportunities. I do not like to stand in lines. I've spent a lot of my life standing in all kinds of lines. Immigration lines, food lines, document lines, all kinds of lines. I do not like lines. When somebody tells me to be patient, wait my turn, stand in the proverbial line, I get increasingly antsy and uncomfortable. I instead look for something that may look a lot riskier as being the first, that has a sort of smaller group of people who are excited about perhaps even being the one and only. I think the risk of being the first, to me, is smaller, or at least not bigger, than the risk of waiting your turn. And I love being the one and only, or the first, because not only do I not have to stand in line and feel like a winner from the day one, it also gives me an opportunity to shape a new world with my definition of justice. And to me, that's very important. And that agency of being able to shape your world to fit your vision, as opposed to optimizing the vision of somebody else that you found yourself in, is very empowering to me. And I would invite folks to look at the world, look at all the proverbial lines where you are invited to follow the path, wait your turn, do the right thing, and then look at parallel worlds where you can be the first, and evaluate whether doing that could be a much more impactful decision for you.
I think that's so important, especially what I found in terms of like computer science and coding, working off of someone else's already built up code base and everything is definitely not as impactful for me as being able to start my own and actually being able to determine what it looks like.
Yeah, you can start life free of technical debt.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a benefit of standing on the shoulders of giants, inheriting the debt and mitigating that. And plenty of people succeed in that. But there are also plenty of people who succeed in not inheriting that technical debt and starting the world from scratch. I invite you to periodically to start the world from scratch.
I feel like it is so much more satisfying that way too. Like you feel like you're working from your own goal rather than, like you said, standing on the shoulders of someone else or being just like a small part of a larger goal that may not even necessarily be your own. So speaking of tech startups and, small companies like this, I know that you're an advisor for tech startups. How do you approach this process? And with so many different companies, do you sort of take it on one by one, case by case basis, or do you have some general notes that you usually follow for advising?
Yeah, it's really hard to generalize around startup because, they're all unique and special. People who start them usually are a little different. They're what I call gems. They're special and unique, and there's not a second one in the world. So it's a little hard to sort of generalize. How do you approach a startup to advise? There's sort of a couple of things that I tend to look for. I tend to really gravitate toward the vision and the mission of the company. I like to hear founders and early employees and investors to articulate to me why did they do this thing that is, a little crazy. Normal people don't get up in the morning and say, I'm going to follow a very difficult path, but something compelled them and I want to understand what it is. And in hearing this origin story, I think you can really ask yourself whether that resonates with you. And if they are ultimately successful, would you like to be in that world? And is this a better world? Do you want to help to shape it? I think going through that process of hearing the origin story and making sure that it vibes, as my teenage daughters would say, with my mission and vision, I think are very, very important. And I probably spent quite a lot of time test driving that and having conversations and helping with our sort of formal relationship for a little while, because I think that that's very important. And then probably look at two more things. The second thing is, do I like these people? Do I want to have them in my life? Do they enrich, what I've had before? Are they the kind of people I want to spend more time or less time? Because ultimately startups are hard and they are very emotional journey, even for those who are stoic, because there are a lot of ups and downs. And you really get to know people through that emotional process of getting what they want and not getting what they want, and having many no's and rallying up to overcome it. And I think, if you invite yourself to be in somebody else's emotional life, I think you better make sure that you want those people in your life. And for me, that's a very, very active decision. And then ultimately, I think the third thing I ask is that, do they have the skills? At least, 2 out of 3 top skills to execute. I do think that passion is one of the skills, and that's what I evaluate sort of in the beginning. But also, if they are building a technology that has not been built before, do they have the technical chops to execute on it? I think that's very important. Likewise, many startups are not necessarily building something technically innovative, but they're innovating on the business model, on a service delivery model. And then I have to ask myself, well, is this the team that is business savvy to deliver this novel thing, to convince folks, to win hearts and minds, to tell that story on the sort of one-to-many, to have conviction? So depending on kind of what it is they're building, I absolutely would ask myself the question, besides sort of the passion and the vision, do they have at least 2 out of 3 top skills? Because, if you're missing one skill, you can pick it up. But if you're missing more than that, you really are disadvantaged. So at some point, I will ask the skills question.
Yeah, I think it's so important to set standards and actually make sure that people are living up to them. Do you find that, having these standards, do you find that most people do meet like all 3 or at least like 2 out of the 3? Or do you find that a lot? You're like, these goals aren't very good. These people these aren't who I want to be around.
I think it's less black and white and more of a process of putting things in your life that fits where you're going and extracting things out of your life that doesn't. Just because it doesn't jive with me or vibe with me, as my teenage daughters would say, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means I'm not the right advisor. Because remember, there's nothing standard around early stage startups. They're usually started by somebody who chosen a more difficult path. This person is not standard. This is not a normal path. And so it's less about black and white, good or bad, and more of, well, I am imperfect and you're imperfect. Are we perfect for each other? And sort of the same question you asked before you married.
Finding like the right piece for you.
Yeah. I have my imperfections, you have yours. But can we collaborate to create perfection in the process, even though both of us are highly imperfect? I think if you can ask that question, then you can then say, look, you have an amazing idea. I'm just not the right person to help you or to be on this journey. I may not be emotionally there. I may not be vibing with your mission and vision. I have nothing to add in terms of skills. All of those things. I think those are important conversations to have for important relationships in your lives, especially those are kind of a little bit more emotional than average.
I love the way that you put that. I really do. That everyone is imperfect and we're just looking for people who I guess can match our imperfections to make something perfect. That is I think a really good mindset to have. I also want to know, you have this very impressive list of accomplishments. You have a very prosperous career, and you're also a mother and you have a personal life. How do you keep up with both of those? How do you balance your professional career with your personal and like mental health?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I think most people who know me would not describe me as balanced. I've never,
oh, really?
I don't think anyone to my face, maybe behind my back, described me as balanced, but I would be very surprised. But I have been described as having clarity because I would say balance means different things to different people. What balance to me may not be balanced to you because we may have different needs and frankly, we may be in different parts of our lives. But I have been described as having clarity of what I want and where I am. And I think that's important because we as people change. Olga that went to college or law school and was single had very different definition of success and what she wants in life than Olga when she was dating. And then when she had her first child and her second child and when her children went to elementary school or middle school. And Olga is absolutely a very different person now that she has 2 teenagers. I read somewhere that our cells basically go through constant change to the point that every 3 years we're literally a different person. I think I pretty much believe that Olga yesterday was a very different Olga, and I need to reevaluate whether the definition of success and timelines are still true. And that's to me what clarity is. Being very clear where you're going, why are you doing it, being open to how, probably more open than I have been in the past, because as I said, I've been dragged into things that I should have said yes to much sooner. But having that clarity about what's important to you today, given all your interests and relationships and ultimately goals of how you want to live the world in the end of the day, when all of that is said and done, I think it's very important. And I think periodically asking yourself, what is my definition of success? Why is it important to me? Asking why more than a few times. And then seeing that there are many hows and looking at landscape and choosing the how that is available to you that makes sense. That clarity, I think, is very important. And so I would reframe from balance to clarity, because I think when you're clear, then all you have to do is to invite things into your life that fit your very clear definition of success.
Thank you. I think that is a really interesting quote, that every 3 years you're like a different person than you were before. I think change is definitely something natural and something almost like good for people. I think staying the same for too long, I feel like I get kind of antsy. I need a little bit of change. I need like a new environment. And especially for me, just going through college, that's definitely been the case. Every single year has been a new Stephanie for me. It's not even been like 3 years. Especially every single year, I was living in a different place, living with different people. And so it felt 4 completely different eras. Something I was almost a little scared about is going into my adult life. Will I not have that same excitement of change, I guess? And even though it is scary, it is still, in my opinion, exciting. So I would hope, I guess, that there's enough like change in my life where I feel like I'm not necessarily a different person, but more, I guess, accomplished, maybe wiser, have different interests, or have the same values, but maybe different goals in every 3 years. So I really like that. I hope that is true for me in my life.
We can make it true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you've had so much really good advice. It's a lot for me to think about, and I will really will remember a lot of this. And I hope that it helps me going in the future as well.
Very good. I'm glad we had this conversation, Stephanie.
Yeah, me too. I'm very thankful for Ashley and VPG for the opportunity to get to talk to you today and meet with you. It's really been amazing. I've had so many learning moments and experiences with VPG and so many people that I would not have gotten to meet at all otherwise. I don't think our paths would ever have crossed really without this.
I love that. And likewise, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I very much look forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Yeah, I really hope you were right, and we'll get to meet in person as well, because while I love meeting virtually over Zoom, it is so different being able to talk with people in person and getting that actual like face-to-face connection.
I can almost guarantee you that I'm not pocket-sized when you meet me in person.